Welcome to another segment of the ASRM Career Close-Up. Today we have Dr. Brittany Woods. We're very excited to talk with her. Hello, Dr. Woods.
Hi.
So Dr. Brittany Woods is a nurse scientist who teaches undergraduate and graduate students and conducts research focused on infertility, mental health, and the REI nursing workforce. She spent a decade in clinical practice as a surgical transplant nurse at UAB and has mentored both new and experienced nurses. In addition, she is currently serving as the vice chair of ASRM's nursing professional group. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty of your career pathway and some of the things that you do and how someone who is like searching for their place in the field might want to approach, finding their niche.
Yeah.
So we'll start with what initially drew you to the field of reproductive medicine, and did you envision this specific role that you're in now early in your career?
So I can definitely say this was not something that I envisioned in my career. My path into reproductive medicine was kind of a personal journey for me. I started, like you said, as an operating room nurse. I worked on the abdominal transplant team. So I spent about 10 years doing liver, kidney, and pancreas transplants. I loved the complexity of that work, honestly, and I did become a certified perioperative nurse, but I always knew that I wanted to advance my career. I just didn't see a clear path that really fit for me. I wasn't really drawn to being like a nurse practitioner or a CRNA or even going into management, just not really my style. So I kind of just hung out in the OR and continued doing what I loved. And then everything kind of shifted during my own journey with infertility. So my husband and I went through multiple treatments. We did everything from medicated cycles up to IVF. Unfortunately, it was not successful due to just kind of several different factors. I had diminished ovarian reserve, we had male factor infertility, and then ultimately we kind of suspected there may have been some genetic issues going on that were affecting egg maturation. So we were never even able to reach a transfer. And so going through that process was just extremely difficult. There was it really opened my eyes in a new way that I never expected. Even with my medical background and my nursing training, I found it very challenging to really navigate the complexities of infertility care. There's a lot of different pieces to it. There's insurance, there's medication, there's the emotional piece of it. And our providers did the best that they possibly could, but I saw firsthand that the system just really wasn't designed to fully support patients, especially in terms of the emotional and mental health care. So I kept thinking, like, if this is this hard for me, how much harder is it for somebody without a medical background that doesn't have that training? And that experience really stayed with me. So I started to feel this pull that maybe I could contribute something different, bringing both that clinical experience and the patient perspective into the field. So I was actually working with a coworker in the OR who was kind of exploring the same issues that I was about wanting to pursue a new career path, but didn't really know how to do it. And she found this BSN to PhD pathway in nursing, and it just immediately clicked, and I knew, I was like, "This is what I've been looking for. This is the path." And so it was a way for me to kinda combine my background, my experiences, and really my desire to improve care for others going through that similar journey, and that's kinda how I ended up where I am now.
That is such a powerful story, and it's such a human thing to have an experience that is pulling your faith, pulling
Yeah,
your life, all the things.
everything.
And right. And then to be able to sort of translate it into something that you can pour yourself into and help and contribute. Yeah, that's really powerful. I so the next question was to walk us through your career path and the key moments that shaped where you are today. So it sounds like
Yeah,
you had a personal experience. Did you say that
yeah.
that was a friend or a mentor who sort of told you about the BSN program?
Honestly, it was just somebody that I worked with, and it was one of those things. I feel like in nursing school, when you're an undergraduate, you're just trying to wrap your brain around everything that's happening. What does nursing even mean? What does that look like? You don't really think about these long-term career paths. A lot of people gravitate towards I want to be a nurse practitioner. That's usually the ultimate advancement. You don't really think about academics. I don't feel like, at least when I was an undergraduate, that wasn't something I really thought about.
Yeah.
And so she had talked about that, and it was like, why did I forget that this was an actual career path? But then you really don't feel like you're prepared for that either. So after spending that time in the OR, I did go back to school full time. And that took 3 years of training, really developing my research study. And that was on the experiences of young women with diminished ovarian reserve. And then I graduated with my PhD in 2023, and then did a postdoctoral fellowship through ORISE, which is the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education. And that was at the CDC with their Division of Reproductive Health. And then I went to UA Capstone College of Nursing, where I am now. And so that was kind of like the steps that I took, but it was not something I had really thought about before. Everybody thinks, oh, you're going to go into management, you're going to be a nurse practitioner. Like, those are the typical advancements. But I knew that just wasn't really the path that I wanted to take. So for me, it was, a little bit non-traditional, I guess.
So what makes the difference between a nurse, like nursing research, and traditional just scientific research? How
So with nursing research versus, like, it can kind of converge or diverge if you wanted to. Like, it can be basic, like, bench science if you want it to be. But a lot of times nursing will focus more on, um, the systems, the patients themselves. Like, that's what's amazing about nursing research. It can diverge in so many different directions. I know people that are looking at data science, at like big data. There's people looking at bench science and like biologics. There's people looking at more holistic viewpoints, and that's kind of where my path tends to go, is more looking at the holistic view of patients, patient-centered care. And so I think nurses kind of provide a little bit different perspective, and that's what's really fun about nursing, is there's so many different paths. Um, you know, one of the it just wasn't something, like I said, it just wasn't something I really ever thought that I would do. I just never imagined being a nurse scientist, that was really a thing, because you don't hear about it that often.
right?
When you hear research, you typically think these are physicians, these are biology majors, you just don't think about nursing in terms of research. And honestly, there's only, I can't remember the exact statistic. I think it's like 3% of nurses
Yeah.
have a doctorate.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was something that was really, it was really meaningful. It was really special for me to do that. And I just kind of, it just clicked when she
Yeah.
started talking about that. I was like, wait, this is a path. And it was like, I was just meant to be there at that time when she was looking up that information. I was like, this is it. This is what I knew I wanted to do.
Absolutely. That's really nice that you were able to find that place. It only came through experience that you were able.
Yeah.
You weren't able to
Yeah.
plan it out. It had to just kind of
No,
happen.
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah. That's lovely. Okay, so what does a typical day or week look like for you?
It's funny. I loved that you sent me these questions, because it gave me a chance to think about it. I really like to think through my answers. And I was laughing when I was thinking about this, because I'm like, there really is not a single typical day
Yeah.
in what I do. In the OR, I think it was more of a typical day, even though it may change from moment to moment and day to day in terms of your patient and things like that, there was still a typical flow. Um, in academia, I feel like there's not, at least in what I'm doing. It's usually a mix for me of teaching, of research, of meetings, collaborations. So I teach both in the undergraduate, in our traditional 4-year nursing program, as well as in our online doctoral program. And so some days, for me, it's more focused on lectures and curriculum development, things like that. Others are more dedicated to my research, to um, analyzing data, writing manuscripts, working on grant proposals. There's been a lot of that lately. And I also advise a lot of quite a few doctoral students in both our PhD and our DNP program. And I'm also the vice president of our local Sigma nursing chapter. So that's like the Sigma Nursing, International Nursing Honor Society is what that is. And so I'm the vice president of our local chapter, as well as the vice chair for ASRM's Nurses Professional Group. So I wear a lot of different hats.
You do. You do.
And so there's a lot of like splitting time between teaching, research, professional service activities, which is great. Like it keeps it really dynamic. It's engaging. It's ever changing. There is never a dull moment.
Yeah.
So,
It helps to love what you do too. So what is, if there's not a typical day, what is, it's okay, like, what is your favorite part about your job?
that's a tough question. Honestly, I love the research. I always laughed. Nothing against my students. I love my students. I really do.
Yeah.
Um, but I always laughed that teaching was kind of the side portion of what I had to do. I wanted to do research. There's a lot of people that go into academia because they wanna teach, um, and research is a byproduct of that. They have to do research in order to teach. For me, it's kind of the opposite. I love doing the research and feeling like I am making an impact, even if it's a very small one, a little bit at a time. I love feeling like I am kind of moving that needle forward. So for me, I love the research part of it. I love being able to collaborate with others to find out, okay, what is working well, what isn't, what can we improve on, what do you need help with? There's a lot more boots on the ground that are in the clinics, and I love making those collaborations with those individuals and with the nurses, with the clinicians to say, okay, what is it that you're facing the most of in the clinic? And then finding out from patients what are you having issues with? And how can we kind of merge those two worlds together and improve care ultimately and make it more patient centered, but also make sure that you know, it's working for both, that it's working for the clinics and for the providers as well as for the patients. So, as
Yeah.
much as I do love teaching, my ultimate goal has always been the research. And for me, the teaching is the byproduct. I love it. And I love seeing their faces light up for the undergraduate students when things click.
Yeah.
And even for the graduate students when they're like, okay, now I get it, and seeing them be able to move forward with things in their field, it's amazing, and so I like being able to prepare them for that.
Okay, so how has the field evolved since you began? Are there any things that you can tell that have really changed in your time?
Um, I think there is a growing recognition within reproductive medicine of the importance of patient-centered care. I do think that is starting to change a little bit, as well as considering mental health and really just overall well-being of patients. I do think we are seeing a little bit of that shift, that didn't used to be the focus, and I think that's true across a lot of fields, honestly. Um, of course, the clinical side of the field is incredibly important, and we have made big advances even in the last few years on that. But I think just alongside that, there's definitely more awareness that outcomes aren't necessarily just medical. They are also emotional and psychological. And, what good does it do, honestly, to have a successful pregnancy and a live birth if you have somebody that has just been emotionally and psychologically torn apart during the process.
Mm,
So I think more and more clinics and providers are beginning to recognize that need to really not only improve access to care, but really just support patients as whole individuals through the process. Um, um, but I think there's also an important shift happening in how we think about provider well-being on the same side of that. If you've ever heard the phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup, I think that really resonates here. And it's something I've really been kind of sitting with a lot lately as I have talked to more of the nurses that are in the clinics and even the clinicians that are saying, we are seeing a high rate of turnover. Um, in short periods of time. You can't train somebody and then have them leave 3 years later that is in such a pivotal role that is detrimental not only to the clinic, but to the patients. And as someone who has personally experienced burnout in my previous role, I can understand and sympathize with how emotionally demanding this type of work can be. So supporting patients through those really complex and sometimes very difficult journeys can take a toll on provider. Um, so, I think as this reproductive health landscape has really evolved, my role within it has kind of shifted as well. So I just have found myself, especially recently, like I said, kind of thinking more broadly about how do we support both patients and providers, through research, through education, through system level improvements, so that care is not only effective, but is sustainable and compassionate for everyone that is involved.
Yeah, but it's such a fundamental part of the experience,
Yeah,
and
it
it's
really
hard to
is.
make it quantitative. So the fact that you're able to do that, that's
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So the next question was what skills or experiences outside of science and medicine have helped you succeed? But it sounds like for sure the intuition and the empathy and some of the softer skills are really important when you're dealing with such a tender part of people's lives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, having a personal experience with infertility, I think that gives me a little bit of a more unique lens, and perspective that's kinda shaped how I approach these types of things, like with patient-centered care, communication, um, but it just, helps me to think a little bit more deeply about it, but having that empathy, having, just that different lens of not thinking, "Okay, let's not just look at the clinical side of things, let's also think about, um, the patients and providers both holistically, and how do we address that?" So I think those are types of things that are really hard to teach, but you can foster those within yourself and within others, and I think that's really paramount to being able to do this kind of work, honestly.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mentorship and like professional. Why do you choose to be so involved with the nursing community? What is the cycle of life that's happening here?
So I think my mentors really did a great job in kind of fostering that in me, and it's kind of like, passing it along. So my mentors opened the doors for me, and really encouraged me to step through them. They had
Can
to
you give us
open
some
them, but I
examples?
had to. Huh?
Can you give us some examples of
Yeah.
mentors and things that happen? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So during my doctoral program at UAB, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Secret Lador. She was my PhD mentor. She's actually now the dean at UNLV School of Nursing. But her work focused on sexual and reproductive health in patients with cystic fibrosis. And so her work was also very deeply personal to her. Her husband had cystic fibrosis. And so she kind of brought with her that same level of passion and purpose that really resonated for me because I always had this imposter syndrome that I shouldn't be doing this. I don't have clinical expertise in this. My clinical background was in OR nursing, and I always like worried, am I going to be taken seriously
Mhm.
if I don't have this training? And she just always reinforced in me, no, like you're going to get the training that you need. You are going to dive so deep into this, into the evidence, into the research. You will become a subject matter expert, and you have the personal experiences to back it up as well. So I came from the clinical and personal perspectives. And so seeing kind of how she translated those personal experiences into her research really helped me shape like how I think about my own work, and kind of help basically deter those feelings of that imposter syndrome and yes, I can really do this. And then we also had, and she was an amazing person for fostering connections, and she was always going to conferences and really stepping out there and saying, "Hey, this is my PhD student, like, this is what she's interested in doing in. Can you, point her in the right direction?" So she was really good about doing that. And so, when I transitioned to University of Alabama here, so I was in Birmingham at UAB. And so when I transferred here, one of the other um, people that was on our research team, Dr. Leanne Bray, she was part of our research team at UAB too. She had also come here, and so having her here really kind of continued, gave me that continuity to, and support. It felt amazing to have somebody here that I knew, and so she has continued to mentor and support me and stuff. And again, she's been amazing about, like, opening these doors and saying, "Hey, this is somebody that I know that she works in, reproductive health. Would you be interested in talking to her?" And just kind of helping me make those connections, and both of them have been really pivotal and kind of pushing me out of my comfort zone because that is something I've really struggled with, and I will kind of forever be grateful for those opportunities, um, but honestly, even more than just mentorship, and that's something I really try to push on to my students as well as saying, "Hey, like, you've got to take those steps. You've gotta put yourself out there." But honestly, ASRM has been huge for me. Um, it has been instrumental in opening those doors. Like, I don't know if you've ever spoken with our MPG chair, Morgan Baker. She has been huge for me. I was so nervous about kind of stepping into the world of ASRM. I was always kind of in the background just as a member, and I knew I wanted to get a little bit more involved. And I had a meeting with her one day, and the call for leadership came out for our MPG board, and she was like, "I absolutely think you should do this." And I was like, "But I'm not a clinical person." Again, that imposter syndrome bubbles
Right.
up, and you're like, "Nobody's going to take me seriously. How can I lead a group that I don't have any clinical experience? I'm not in the clinic. I'm not dealing with these issues every day." And she's like, "No, but we need those diverse perspectives." And it has been really instrumental in helping me grow as a leader and helping me build these connections and these collaborations, and really just exposing me to new opportunities like going to Congress and going to the joint conference. Like, has been huge to grow my professional networks um, and make those connections, like, at the joint conference, I met so many people this last year that was the first joint one that I had ever been to, and it was amazing. Like, we came out of there, like, feeling just renewed with ideas, and "We wanna do this, we wanna do this, we wanna," and I was like, "Okay, great," and it was amazing, and so for me, that has been probably, it's not necessarily formal mentorship for me in that sense, but it has just been really instrumental between my mentors and that it has just, they've kind of pushed me to make those steps, and that's something I really try to encourage my students to do is if there's an opportunity, take it. You
Mhm.
know, I don't know if you've ever heard the courage comes before confidence. There's
Mhm.
a lot of times you just have to step out there and just do it, and it will open doors that you never expected, and I really try to tell my students to do the same thing. Like, if you see an opportunity, just do it. Like, whether you feel confident in it or not, just go ahead and do it because you don't know where it could lead. And my mentors have been amazing in just really encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone and do those things that I'm just petrified of doing, honestly, but I know they do it for my own good, and I try to really instill that in my students as well. So I kinda try to continue that cycle, and I hope that my students will do the same thing moving forward for.
What is one piece of career advice that you wish you had received earlier in your career?
Okay. Um, I wish that I had known earlier, and this would be a piece of advice that I would give to anybody. Career paths don't have to be linear. I think I took what I considered at the time to be a non-traditional route. I did a total, 180 from OR nursing into academia in a field that I had no experience in. Um, and it's okay to explore different opportunities and adjust your direction over time because it's going to happen. And that is one thing I love about nursing is that there are so many different paths. It's not just bedside nursing or ICU or 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 research or academic. Like, there's so many different paths, and that's true across, I feel like, all fields of medicine. You know, um, there's just so many different paths. So it is okay to explore those and adjust as needed. Um, be open to new experiences and saying yes to opportunities, even when they feel outside of your comfort zone, because most of the time they will be. At least for me, maybe my comfort zone was just small. It is slowly expanding, but it can honestly lead to some of the most rewarding and unexpected um, career moves.
It's really good. I think that's a great note to just end the interview on. I mean, that can be so liberating. Your career path does not have to be linear.
Yeah.
It gives you permission to just treat it almost like, it's fun.
I think our life experiences definitely shape not only who we are, but how we perceive everything around us. And I've definitely been through a few times. I know there's plenty of people that have had a lot more difficulties than me, but I think everybody has difficult moments, and how you experience those and how you handle them really can shape who you are in the future.
Well, Dr.
Yeah.
Woods, thank you so much for your time. This was
Well,
really
thank you
good.
so much. Thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It was fun.